Welcome to On the Brink with Andy Simon. Thanks for joining us today, whether you're watching or you are listening. I'm Andy Simon, and as you know, my job is to get you off the brink. I want you to become a little like me, an anthropologist. Go explore, be curious, observe, and see what could help you see, feel, and think in new ways so you can adapt to these fast changing times. And they are changing faster and faster. Today, I have a wonderful guest for you from Paris. We are global, and I have people from across the globe. But this is a wonderful individual who's going to help you do all of my wishes, see, feel, and think in new ways. His name is Jeremy Wiliams, and I'm going to have him introduce himself in a moment. But let me just tell you why it's important for you to listen to Jeremy. He's a certified Geno's emotional intelligence practitioner. It was funny because we were talking about who we are and what we do. And I always say I am an anthropologist. While I do it, I know how I look at the world. Jeremy says he too is an emotional intelligence practitioner. He sees the world in a particular way. And his conversation with you today is going to share with you how you can as well. He's a coach and a consultant. He has many years of experience helping hyper growth companies enhance team performance, engagement. Man, I've had clients talk to me recently about how do I improve engagement. It's become the new buzzword, maybe, but I think there's something really important because people want to belong, and client retention. Working across industries from tech and finance and pharma, he specializes in developing key skills, some of which you may want to get more of, like self-awareness, empathy, and positive influence to build high-performing teams. He's a creator of a program that we'll discuss called Peer Coaching 460 program. And this is important. I have several clients who have realized that peer-to-peer coaching is really very useful. And what I can see in my peer, they may not be seen in a coach or someone outside, but what we can do to help each other is fantastic. And my leadership academies will love you. Jeremy, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Andy. Great to be here on the Brink podcast with you today.
Well,
Thanks for
thanks for
inviting.
coming from Paris. Tell our listeners your own story. Remember, the story is what we live. And you have a particular story that we were sharing just before we went on air about your own journey. So share with the listeners about your own journey and how we got to the point where this is what you're passionate about.
Absolutely. So it all started back in the 90s when I was a sailing instructor. It was my first passion, and I developed a real passion for this particular sport and sharing my interest for the subject with many people. And I realized at that stage that I had a gift, I had a passion for passing on, things that I was really interested in. So I developed that over a course of a few years, and I decided I was going to move into the area of sales. So, of course, I moved from boats then into motorcycles, luxury Italian motorcycles, so very different. And from there, I stepped into the property industry. So you can imagine three very, very different journeys or parts of the journey. Obviously, I learned a lot. I then moved over to France and developed, moved into the teaching area, actually teaching English originally to business professionals. And then from there, I stepped into the consultancy world and I started to work with some very exciting, very small companies about 10 years ago or so that were in the tech sphere. So these were companies that were just starting, working out of a little apartment with three or four very energetic, people that had a vision to change the world. And it was super exciting. And I quickly realized that as these companies started to grow, so they were getting to a stage where they had maybe 20, 30, 40 people, that emotional intelligence, or back then they were sort of calling it soft skills, were very, very important. And I dug into this subject a little more, got involved with a few companies where I actually wrote training material and rolled out soft skills and emotional intelligence training. So things around empathy, showing compassion, positive influence, etc. And that was when the penny dropped for me. I was like, this is why I'm here, because emotional intelligence is at the heart of who we are, how we show up every day with all of the key stakeholders in our lives. And from that moment on, I've really doubled down and made it my mission to help to spread the word of how important emotional intelligence is to all of us in not just our professional lives, but our personal lives too. And of course, just to finish off the journey, we're now in the era of artificial intelligence and exponential technology. There has never been, a moment as important as mastering emotional intelligence right now in the face of the algorithm.
Well, you need to help our audience know what you mean by emotional intelligence, because it isn't a thing, it's several things. It's a self-awareness, it's social skills, it's relationship building, it's understanding how to feel without necessarily being sympathetic, being empathetic. And as we know, the best leaders have very strong emotional intelligence. More than that, even, but help our leaders, our listeners, and our viewers. What is, from your perspective, emotional intelligence? Why should they pay attention?
Yeah, I mean, there are many, many different ways of summarizing it, but what I would say is it's effectively how we positively deal with negative emotions.
Ah,
So, for example, as a parent, there are many times when my patience is tested. We've all been in that situation. The gut reaction of many people is to raise their voice. When you've asked numerous times for something to be done and it hasn't been done, it's a natural reaction for many people to raise their voice as they become more frustrated. But we all know to be great parents, what we should do in that moment is not raise our voice, is to just calm down, take a breath, reflect somewhat, and engage with our child in this moment and move ahead in a very constructive way. So that would be a good example of how we deal positively with negative emotions. And obviously, this is the same for the business world, on a daily basis for many of your listeners.
well, we often decide with the heart and the eyes, and the emotions kick in when, in fact, a little quiet wisdom might be a better way of dealing with the situation. And so as you're thinking about explaining emotional intelligence to our listeners, tell me about the Geno's emotional intelligence practitionership that you have, and how does that work? Because my hunch is that you go deeper into the human besides the key characteristics of just emotional intelligence.
Indeed, yeah. So Daniel Goleman kicks off with the book Emotional Intelligence, which we all know and love, and many people cite that as like the advent of emotional intelligence in the modern world. He was the first one to really bring it from academia and start to share it with the masses so people could actually understand it. And then Dr. Ben Palmer started Genus so in Australia in 2001. And what they did is they took these fundamentals that Daniel Goleman had educated many people around and codified it, put it into a way I think that was very easy, very visual to understand. So you have the six competencies, and then you have the positive behaviors and the negative behaviors. So, for example, everything starts off with self awareness. The way we get up in the morning, the way we get out of bed, the way we show up will impact everything that happens to us that day.
Mhm.
So, the positive area of self awareness would be being present. And incidentally, this is one of the biggest challenges in this era of technology when we are there, maybe Zoom call, for example. Are you actually really there, or are you multitasking, looking at a multitude of apps and distractions as they come through? I think
Oh,
many of your listeners
Jeremy,
will be.
that's a very good point and a very important one. But please continue. What are the other elements?
Yeah, see, then you have obviously awareness of others. So the positive behavior here would be showing empathy, which again has been talked about a lot over the last few years. It's really, really important. It's core, I would say, to having a high level of emotional intelligence. Then you move on to authenticity, so showing up in a very genuine way. I heard somebody describe it once as like standing in your own truth. I think is
Oh,
very
don't miss that
eloquent.
one. That is a remember, standing in your own truth. Wow. Particularly
Yeah.
when I often say the only truth is there's no truth. So that's a very important point there. Please, and the others.
Indeed. And then emotional reasoning, and this is when I mentioned to you about the copy paste problem. This, I think, is a good example of emotional reasoning. So, in a nutshell, what this is how we bring together fact and emotions.
Ah,
Yeah. So, the positive behavior of this one would be to be expansive or open-minded. But to give you an example for your listeners, we've all had situations, let's say, when we're relatively experienced in our role. Let's say we have an intern or somebody less experienced that comes into the mix and they have a problem faced with a challenge. They come to you and say, "Hey, I've got this problem. Have you got a few minutes to help me with this?" Yeah, say, absolutely, no problem. Just summarize it to me, please. So they summarize the issue to you. And then as you're listening to them, you start to think, okay, have I experienced something similar before? Yes or no? Okay. Yes, I have. It was a few years ago. Okay. So what did I do? Well, I did this, this, and this. Here's the important part. Do I perceive that I was successful in how I dealt with this situation all those years ago? Yes. It's very tempting at that moment to copy paste your solution to this young person stood in front of you, eagerly awaiting the magical
yes,
solution, right?
right.
Or vice versa. You had options A and B a few years ago and you were faced with something similar. You chose option A, but with hindsight afterwards, you realized that option B would have been better. It's very tempting in that moment to try and make a wrong a right and give this young person in front of you option B, right? But if you have a high level of emotional reasoning in this situation, if you demonstrate that, then you would take account of your emotions, so your past perceived successes or failures, pause it, and you would ask some more specific deep dive questions to get more of the facts about this particular scenario. And then you would join them together and move on from there. If you do that, you're demonstrating a high level of emotional reasoning. And I would say it's one of the most difficult competencies to master as a human being because we are led by our emotions.
I know. But there's a related piece to that. And people are looking for role models. That copy and paste. I love your copy and paste model. But in many ways, they have the answer, the person coming with the problem. And I learned a long time ago, try not to answer the question, but to ask questions so they can answer the question. And I don't know how that fits into the models that you work with, but often we come with our answers. We just want somebody to affirm them or give us the confidence to believe in them. And the last thing we want to be is the Google solution provider for every question in our organization. Just go ask Andy. Well, position provides all kinds of credibility about it, but you don't need to be everyone's answer man. So, some thoughts. I mean, do we turn it back and push it back onto the individual or try and guide them?
It's a mixture. I would say there are arguments for both. What I've been seeing a lot with these hypergrowth, these very exciting hypergrowth companies, is a sense of empowerment, and I love
Oh,
that. I love that. So in that to that end, what is much better is to follow something like the PIO model, rigorous thinking,
mhm.
which would be somebody comes to you with a challenge. What you do before that even happens is you educate your team members. It's what some of my clients have been doing in how to communicate. So
Yes,
the PIO model, in a nutshell, so it's an acronym. So the P is proof. What proof do you have that action needs to be taken regarding this problem or this challenge? Okay, so we got so much data around now, you can always have a very powerful data point that will give you the proof, right? The I
Uh,
is the impact. Okay, so what is the impact of action, as in acting on your suggestion, or inaction? You can look at both prongs of this fork here. So, what's the impact? And then when you get to the E is like the energy. What is needed from me as your manager, CEO, COO, etc.? What resources are needed to realize what you're suggesting here? Okay, so that can be formulated in many ways. And the fourth point, so the O of the PIO model, would be how is this linked to the overall objective of the business for this quarter or this year? So if you teach your team members to think and to communicate like this, when you actually do have conversations with them, many times in many situations they are a lot more efficient. So
yes,
linking that back to your question, Andy, that's how I would approach it.
yep. But
Yeah.
Jeremy, the PIO, I have not heard it before. I love it because it's teaching. um, conversational intelligence about how we can solve things, and the brain much prefers a we than an I. And it really does create much more, the serotonin and the oxytocin is much better hormones than than the bad guys running around there telling you to flee. But I'm going to remember that with some of my clients because they could use this with their employees. They are anxious to build engagement. One of the things you said you work on are engagements.
Mhm.
And share a little bit with our audience about how the approach you take improves what is employee engagement and how are we missing? Because then I want to get to the AI world and how that is disrupting. But for a moment, because you're working with some really cool methodologies here, PIO for one of them, to build better communication, more conversational intelligence, and I'm hoping therefore engagement. Your thoughts?
Yeah, so obviously it all starts off with engagement, and unless you can engage your collaborators, you're not going to go anywhere. So the first thing for me, keying right into emotional intelligence, is being present.
Ah,
So when you join a company, of course, you have all of in many cases, the companies I've been working with, you have the values written on the wall everywhere in all the meeting rooms. There are reminders all over the place. But to really engage, you have to, as well as talk the talk, you've got to walk the walk, and you've got to encourage your employees. Of course, the onboarding process is another conversation. There has to be
mm,
a very close alignment there of values. Um, but when it comes to engaging them, I think the first thing is being present,
yeah,
to discourage multitasking. I'm not a fan of multitasking at all. I know there are certain jobs, certain roles that where it's a necessity. Okay, I've got that. But the vast majority of roles, it's better to have periods of very focused, productive, deep work. And so, therefore, if you want to maximize engagement in a meeting, generally speaking, within a team, you've got to get people on the same page and focused on the moment.
yes,
So that for me is route one. And you can actually go as granular as actually putting together some best practice. How do we show up in meetings? No multitasking, silence, Slack, etc., etc., etc. So we can focus on the meetings. And then, as we said with PIO, encouraging or training your team members on this is how I would like you to communicate with each other. So therefore, when you do actually have meetings, rather than a default 1 hour, with super efficient communication and high level of engagement, probably reduce those meetings to 30 minutes,
yes.
which,
It's
which
interesting, your
go
comment
on.
about multitasking. Every time I write down a note, I can't hear what you're saying. And I said, what an interesting illustration for me that it's nice to record something that I just heard that I want to remember, multitask, but you can't do both. I can either listen to Jeremy and be engaged, or I can write a note and not be engaged. And it was just a simple moment where I said, I got to remember that you cannot do two things well. You can do one or the other. But you have to, if you're going to build an organization that thrives and hums, you got to focus. So this becomes really important. Now, with the world of AI upon us, what does that do to all of these methodologies, theories, beliefs about engagement and focus in emotional intelligence?
Wow, that's a great question.
Well, that's a good
That
answer to start us with.
Yeah, there are so many distractions. It's number one, it's an amazing technology and it's here to stay and it's changing the world. There's zero doubt about that. But I think there are some things we need to keep in mind. Um, AI, okay, we've heard about reasoning more and more recently. But if you imagine, Andy, imagine we are tasked with solving a problem, okay? You have your area of expertise. You have your specific journey that you've been on from when you were born until this very moment. Me too. So the way that we will reason when it comes to dealing with this problem will be uniquely us. It'll be
Ooh,
our way.
exactly.
Okay. So it's a unique approach. Now we might come up with a similar solution. We might come up with solutions that are very, very different. So reasoning is very much an individual thing. yes, the AI is starting to do this more, but what effectively it's doing is pulling from huge data sets and coming up with an average. And this is what it's important to understand with artificial intelligence is it pulls a consensus agreement through all of the huge amounts of data that it learns from. So things like reasoning, my contention is this is uniquely human. Yes, AI will start to get more involved with this particular aspect, and we're seeing that now with many of these tools that we use. It's telling us how it's coming to the
Hmm.
final suggestion. So that's interesting. So reasoning would be one. The second is creativity. People are like, oh, AI is amazingly creative. No, no. As humans, we have to sow the seed
Hmm.
of the idea. The AI is fantastic when it comes to being a sparring partner, brainstorming, giving us some pretty interesting ideas, and it is very good at that. But we still need to sow the seed of that creativity. So that's one aspect of the creativity side, is again, that's uniquely individual. Like if we are both asked to create something,
Hmm.
the creation that we will come up with will be very much determined by the experiences that we've had in our respective lives. So there's that element. But the other one, which is I think really interesting as well, many of the masterpieces that we've enjoyed in our lives, so I'm talking about art and music amongst others, were actually born of there were mistakes. I have a real problem with the word perfection because it's so subjective. But if you think of some, I mean, I'm British, so hey, I love the British music, Beatles, Rolling Stones, etc., etc. But many of their masterpieces were actually not what they intended originally. They were effectively mistakes, or they were outcomes that were very different. So that's very, very interesting to observe because it's the imperfections that make it so beautiful when it comes to creations in many cases.
Do you, from your perspective, see this not as, it's hard to know what it is when things are sort of strange. They don't fit in a box, and humans want boxes. And I'm fascinated because it has so many different dimensions to it. It adds another framework. All of the data that's out there has very little purpose. I used to teach a course for healthcare strategists. Is your data talking to you? Can you hear it? Because the story in your mind sort of framed what you would select. And you only saw the data that affirmed what you believed to be true. And since there's no truth, it was very hard to see data that, didn't fit. And I spend my days helping clients get unstuck by seeing what's there that they can't see. And so here we have a whole new source of analytics. You ask it the right question and you come back with an interesting answer that you like. If you ask it the wrong question, you come back with an interesting answer that may not fit but could be interesting. But I'm finding it an addition as opposed to a replacement, a way of getting access to data that you couldn't have easily on your own. I don't know how you could sort through the millions of data points. But boy, is it powerful. But my concern is how do people belong in organizations that are migrating to use more of the insights coming from the data than just simply creating the data? It's like a whole new culture emerging in a world where it's not quite the Luddites, but it's sort of like a whole new machine. And I'm anxious to hear your perspective since you're working with these young companies creating this stuff. What do you see? How do they feel?
So generally speaking, if you take a step back, you can look at the key technological innovations of the last few decades have had one thing in common. They've allowed us to speed up. They've allowed us to become more efficient, whatever that actually means. Yeah. So that's another conversation, right?
No, but it's a
But
true question. What is more efficient? But we are it, whatever it is.
exactly. So how I see it, if you take a big step back, is you've got life is a journey, not a destination.
Yes.
Famous saying. Okay. AI is going to take, in my view, more and more of a focus on the deliverable, on the destination, let's say, if we simply put it like that. So it's going to get to a stage within the next 12 months where collectively it'll be more intelligent, inverted commas, than humans, as in it can do a lot of the algorithmic stuff way faster than human beings. So it's going to become predominantly focused on the productivity side, on the deliverables, and it's going to do very well at that, no doubt about it. So any human role, the moment that is focused on this aspect, is going to change, and anybody in that type of role needs to start thinking, I think, right away, how is my role going to look in 1, 2, 3, 5 years time, and adjust accordingly. So it's going to take control of this. What does that do with humans? It then brings us back to the journey. And when we look at the journey, what's incredibly important? It's building and nurturing human connection, which
Yeah.
is emotional intelligence. So, this is why I'm so passionate about emotional intelligence, because in the face of the algorithm, it is our one key differentiator as humans.
Yeah.
So, I think, in answer to your question, a lot of the people that I'm working with that understand this technology know that it's going to boost productivity 4 or 5-fold in quite a short space of time. But what it's doing is it's freeing up these collaborators to focus on the building the connections with other stakeholders internally and externally, spending quality time building trust, because business is about people. The
Yeah.
technology comes and goes and it accelerates certain processes, and it's amazing, and we must embrace it. But we must never forget that business and life is predominantly about people.
Well, that sort of leads us to peer coaching 460. And I didn't want us not to have a context for discussing it because, to your point, people have a hard time talking to people, working with people, being with people, hearing themselves in a relationship with people, liking each other, and working well together in an organization with themselves or with their clients. And I'm hoping that that's not weird, but that's what I find. And they live on a veneer. And so, how have you applied this? Perhaps the program is one that you can describe, but I have a hunch you've also begun to watch people try and reframe those relationships in an age where the work they used to have to do, the expertise they used to have, isn't needed anymore. Your thoughts?
Yeah, so the peer coaching was born from a series of training sessions I went through over a few years, where participants were coming to these training sessions on, how to show up and show brilliant empathy, for example, a high level of empathy in your particular work. So participants would come up to these company organized training sessions, maybe 30 people or so. We had obviously the content that we would roll out, and very often it was very well received. And I sensed that there was it landed really well. But I often felt that people in these sessions, they had problems, real challenges that they wanted to share. But for whatever reason, they didn't feel comfortable doing that. Maybe, somebody involved with this particular challenge, a boss or a colleague, was actually in the room. So understandably, they weren't comfortable candidly sharing this challenge. So it started to happen time after time after time. I remember thinking there's an opportunity here. People want to share. They want to share their challenges, whatever they might be. So that's where it came from. And I thought, well, you get 4 people. It's, a small group. It's pretty intimate, from different areas of the business, different companies, different sectors sometimes. Bring these people together, build a close connection, and give each of them a session to completely focus on their challenge. So that hence the 4 sessions over 4 weeks for 4 people. It's and simple. So session one, the first candidate will share for 10 minutes their challenge. Then 10 minutes, their peers will ask them some deeper dive questions. 20 minutes, we ask the candidate to close their camera and audio. So they just observe and take notes, pen and paper. Good old fashioned approach, but really important. Take notes and observe what their colleagues, what their peers, I should say, are discussing. Then we bring everybody back together and share the insight, and the candidate goes away with some things that they can work on and apply as much as they would like to. And then the next session, we turn the tables. So one of their peers will come into the hot seat. So basically, by the end of the cohort, everybody, number one, they've built a connection. So very often these peers connect on LinkedIn and the community starts building. But they have a chance to get insight on their challenge, and also they get a chance to sit on the other side of the table and work on things like active listening, offering feedback, showing empathy,
Mhm.
compassion, etc. So my mission with this is to build a global support network of peers that can dip in and out of these sessions to gather insight on challenges, but also to share their expertise across sectors. So it's a much bigger vision that I have that I'm starting to build as we
Sounds
speak.
like you'd like to build a tribe of emotionally intelligent individuals who can help each other be happy, enjoy it every day, be positive. You know, life's a short trip. If we're not happy and we're not enjoying it, it makes it very unpleasant and it ends far too soon. But the times they are changing and that requires us to have some trust that somebody can give us some perspective. And sometimes things happen and we don't quite know why. And reflection is not that easy. Sounds like a wonderful program. It's really very,
Thank you.
as you're looking forward, are you thinking about migrating the programs that you do in some fashion to be more attuned to the impact of artificial intelligence or other technology? I mean, the fourth industrial revolution is not just AI or machine learning or blockchain, it's everything. But yeah,
Absolutely, yes. I mean, we actually the whole idea is to help people get ready for Web3, which are some of the elements that you've just mentioned. So it's going to be a world which is a lot faster than the world we're in right now. It's going to be a world where, as we said earlier, human connection is incredibly important, so that those moments of candid sharing when it comes to the real challenges that people are facing. But in the same breath, we actually use artificial intelligence, an agent to actually follow our meetings called Ula. And she actually gives us a summary of what we discuss after each session. Because, of course, when you're in the moment, it's easy to focus on some things and miss other aspects. It's always good to have let's say, an executive summary after,
yeah,
just to refer back to. So we leverage the AI
yeah.
and we will be leveraging it more. But of course, the central, the vein running through it all is emotional intelligence and the time. You need time to build connection with people. There's no quick fix.
I
There's
know.
no app. You've got to spend the time. It's the most valuable thing we have.
Yes, and that requires us to be humble and to listen carefully and to be kind to each other and to ourselves. And I'm smiling because I'm so glad you're here today. I have some leadership academies and I'm going to bring along a little IO and thinking about how do we help each other thrive in fast changing times. And in some ways, we help each other better than anybody like myself. I'm an enabler, a facilitator, never the communicator I might have been, I don't know, a while ago, where I'd be the knowledge person. And now, how do I help you find the wisdom you need in order to have a really good place in this world? And that's important for us. One
Mm.
or two things you want our listeners and viewers not to forget, your last parting words, and then we'll talk about how to find you.
Great. Yeah. So, I mean, my parting words would be is that this is a technology to embrace. This is an era to really wholeheartedly embrace because the potential that artificial intelligence and blockchain and all of this other exponential technologies is going to bring is going to be amazing. I mean, many of the roles that will exist in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years do not exist today. So, in the face of that amazing, paradigm shift, we need to focus on being as emotional intelligence, as we can be, and advocating for that, within our communities. And we need to really focus on building those connections, with our peers, with our colleagues, and supporting each other
Yeah,
as we move into this era of exponential change.
yeah.
So it's very exciting. Don't be scared of it. Don't run away from it. Learn about it, embrace it, and I think it's going to change our world for the better.
Well, you can think, I agree, but remember that what is sort of normal. It's not anything. You can make it happy or make it sad, make it happy. It's a much better place. I'll add a little final wisdom from our perspective. We always urge our clients to say thank you, to express their gratitude. It helps you at the same time as it helps somebody else. You know, we're connected by that feeling of appreciation. And I love to say you have to feel trusted, important, special, and appreciated. And that's not hard to do. It doesn't require a great deal of science or technique. It just requires a thank you, a little gratitude, and an appreciation. And those are such core to who we are as humans that don't lose them. The AI adds another dimension to it. So does blockchain and machine learning and all of this. Enjoy it. It's a great, great time. If they want to reach you, what's the best way other than going to Paris? How can they find you?
So I'm on LinkedIn, Jeremy Williams. You'll find me very easily. There aren't too many Jeremys out there. Jeremy Williams is out there. And also my website, it's called fluentexecutive.com, where
Wonderful.
you'll find more out about what I'm up to.
Well, I promise you we'll put it onto the on the video and onto the blog that we write about it, and we'll share Jeremy so that his wisdom can become part of your everyday way of waking up in the morning and feeling I'm here and stand in your own truth because I love his ideas. They are just cool. Jeremy, thanks so much for being here. Let me wrap. For all of you who come all the time, I think Jeremy's going to be our 440th podcast. I think that's 7 years of podcasting. And you've launched us into the top 5% of global podcasts. There are only 14 million of us, but that's perfectly wonderful. And I'm enjoying the journey with you, and I love to share. Our books are here for you. They're all designed to help you see, feel, and think in new ways. On the Brink, Rethink, and Women Mean Business. They're all on Amazon under Andi Simon. Our website is simonassociates.net. And on that, you will see how we really are designed to help you get off the brink. You know, the idea is that if you get stuck or stalled, whether it's an individual who needs some personal coaching, or you're a company that all of a sudden can't see its way forward, all the business environment seems to be under change. And I keep hearing about deep freezes, they will go away. You got through the pandemic. I know you will get through this too. Just be patient and kind. And a little emotional intelligence might be a really good thing to practice right now. Care about each other and enjoy the journey. Remember, my tagline is take your observations, turn them into innovation. And as you listen to Jeremy, he was in boats and he was in motorcycles and he was in sales. And then he had an epiphany and he knew who he was and what he was going to do next to help others really become better people. And that's why I've enjoyed having him today. Jeremy, thanks again. I appreciate you coming. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Andy.
Bye-bye.